Welcome to the Friday Night Campfire Stories. My name is Rob and I will be your host for this evening. Every single Friday here on my channel, we share one chapter from one of my short stories with you guys. Last week we started a brand new story called Survive. Survive follows our main character Martin, who's decided that he is done with society and civilization. He wants to start his own world and live off his own instincts and his own survival experience. The problem is, his survival experience is kind of non-existent. He's never really done anything like that before. But he still wants to give it a shot. He still wants to create his own community, pretty much his own world to live in, where he is fully reliant on himself. But he also learns that the basic needs of survival, eating, drinking, and just building a shelter, is just the beginning of what he needs to survive, because there's also creatures lurking out in the forest that are unknown to him, and they are lurking and watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. This is Chapter 2 of my story, Survive. Survive, Chapter 2. Martin awoke to a crisp morning air. The memories of the previous night's successful hunt still fresh in his mind. The rabbit had provided him with his first real meal in over a week, giving him a much-needed boost of energy and morale. The sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. For the first time since his ordeal began, he felt a glimmer of hope. Determined to build on this small victory, Martin decided to try his hand in fishing again. He had spent the morning refining his fishing line, using a more flexible vine and fashioning a better hook from a piece of wire he had found washed up on shore. His fingers worked with a newfound purpose, each movement a small step towards mastering his environment. By midday, Martin was back at the stream, his makeshift line in hand. He carefully selected a spot where the water was clear and slow moving, and he cast his line. As he sat on the bank, he watched the water intently, his earlier frustration replaced with a quiet determination. Minutes turned into hours, and just as doubt began to creep in, he felt a tug. His heart leaped as he carefully reeled in the line. There, at the end of his hook, was a small fish, its scales glistening in the sunlight. He let out a triumphant shout, unable to contain his excitement. He had done it. He had caught his first fish. Martin quickly dispatched the fish and cleaned it by the stream, his hands moving with surprising confidence. The smell of roasting fish later that afternoon was a welcome change, and as he ate, he felt a sense of accomplishment that he hadn't experienced since arriving in the forest. He was beginning to believe that he could truly survive here. With his immediate hunger satisfied, Martin turned his attention to his shelter. The lean-to had served its purpose, but it was clear he needed something more sustainable if he was going to live here long term. He had spent the next few days gathering material, strong branches, leaves, and vines, and slowly began to upgrade his shelter. At first, the process was frustrating. The branches wouldn't stay in place, and the walls collapsed more than once. But Martin persevered, learning from each failure. He lashed the branches together with vines, creating a sturdy frame. He layered leaves and smaller branches on top, forming a roof that could withstand the elements. Each evening, he worked until the light faded, his body aching but his spirit undeterred. Slowly but surely, the structure began to take shape. He built a small wooden door, securing it with a latch made from a bent piece of metal that he had found. As he stepped back to survey his work, he felt a swell of pride. It wasn't perfect, but it was a significant improvement. A month had passed since he had first stumbled into the forest, ill-prepared and terrified. Now, as he stood in front of his small one-room house, he felt a sense of accomplishment he had never known before. The shelter was sturdy, providing him with a secure place to sleep. The small victories, catching fish, upgrading his shelter, gave him confidence and hope. The forest, once an alien and threatening place, had become his home. He knew its rhythm and sounds, and though the creature's nocturnal growls still echoed through the trees, they no longer filled him with fear. They were just part of the forest, a reminder that he was not alone, but not necessarily in danger. Martin sat by the fire one evening, watching the flames dance and crackle. He had become adept at maintaining it, gathering enough firewood to last through the night. The warmth and light provided him comfort, a buffer against the darkness that surrounded him. As he stared into the flames, he thought about his journey. He had come to the forest seeking something, an escape, a challenge, perhaps a new beginning. He had found all those things and more. He had discovered a resilience within him that he had not known existed. Each day was a new challenge, but also a new opportunity to learn and grow. The noises of the creature were a constant reminder of the unknown, but Martin had learned to accept it. They were just a part of the forest's soundtrack, mingling with the rustling leaves and chirping insects. He didn't know what the creature was, and maybe he never would, but for now, it was just another part of the world he'd chosen to make his home. As the fire crackled and the stars began to appear in the night sky, Martin felt a profound sense of peace. He had found his way into the wilderness, carving out a life for himself with his own two hands. He had no longer just been surviving, he was living, and whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them. Martin's days in the forest began to follow a rhythm. Each morning, he awoke with the sun, stretching his muscles and breathing fresh, crisp air. He had become adept at foraging, identifying which plants and berries were safe to eat. He had even stumbled upon a patch of wild onions, their sharp scent a delightful addition to his meals. Fishing had become part of his daily routine, and Martin's skills had significantly improved. He had crafted a more effective fishing rod from flexible branches and a proper hook and some improvised bait. He often returned to camp with a couple of decent-sized fish. His meals were no longer just about survival, they were something to look forward to, something he took pride in preparing. His shelter had evolved into a cozy one-room house. The walls were reinforced with a mixture of mud and leaves, creating a sturdy barrier against the element. The roof, now layered with thick foliage and bark, kept the rain out effectively. The wooden door, secured with a latch that he had carved from a sturdy branch, gave him a sense of security he hadn't felt since leaving civilization. Martin even fashioned a small table and bench from fallen logs, giving his home a sense of permanence and comfort. Each improvement made him feel more at ease, more connected with his life that he had chosen. He had even started a small garden, planting seeds he had found and nurturing the tiny sprouts with care. Despite the occasional pang of loneliness, Martin felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had not only survived, but he had begun to thrive in the wilderness. His body had grown lean and strong, his mind sharp and alert. The forest had become his home, a place where he felt a deep, abiding connection to the natural world. Yet, despite his growing confidence, the eerie nocturnal sounds never completely faded from his awareness. The guttural growls and strange rustlings were a constant reminder that he shared the forest with other creatures, some of which he has never seen. One night, Martin woke with the urgent need to relieve himself. He quickly slipped out of his shelter, careful not to disturb the peace of night. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a soft, flickering glow around the camp. He moved a short distance away into the cover of the trees and emptied his bladder. As he finished, a feeling of unease washed over him. The night was unnaturally quiet, the usual chorus of insects and distinct animal calls conspicuously absent. He stood still, his breath fogged in the cool night air, and scanned the darkness around him. Then, he saw them. Two bright, glowing eyes staring back at him from the shadows. They were set high off the ground, indicating the creature stood at least 7 to 9 feet tall. Martin's heart pounded in his chest as he took a step back, his mind racing. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The creature did not move, its glowing eyes fixed on Martin. He could barely make out its silhouette, a massive, hulking figure blending seamlessly with the night. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The beast was real. The noises, the sense of being watched, the strange tracks he had occasionally found, they all made sense now. Instinctively, Martin slowly raised his hand, trying to appear non-threatening. He held his breath, his eyes locked with the creature. The air between them was thick with tension, and Martin's mind raced with the thought of escape. After what felt like an eternity, the creature blinked once, and then turned and melted back into the Shadows forest. Martin stood rooted to his spot, his heart hammering in his chest. He strained his ears, but the forest remained eerily silent. His movements slow and deliberate. Once inside, he had secured the door and stoked the fire, its warmth and light offering some semblance of safety. He sat down, his back against the wall, and tried to steady his breathing. The encounter had shattered his sense of security, reminding him that despite his successes, the forest was still wild and untamed. The beast was real, and it was out there, watching. Martin knew he would need to remain vigilant, but he also felt a strange sense of acceptance. The forest was his home now, and not like any home, it had its dangers. As the fire crackled, and the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, Martin felt a renewed determination. He had faced the unknown and survived. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready to face it, one day at a time. As dawn's light filtered through the canopy, Martin sat by the fire, the embers glowing faintly. The encounter from the night before weighed heavily on his mind, and the reality of the beast had shattered the thin veneer of safety he had built for himself. For a moment, he had considered leaving the forest. The thought of returning to civilization, to the comfort and security it offered, was tempting. But as he pondered the idea, he realized that the world outside the forest had nothing to offer him anymore. He had no friends, no family waiting for him. His old life seemed like a series of hollow routines and empty interactions. Here, despite the danger, he had felt a sense of purpose. The shelter he had built with his own 2 hands was more than just a structure. It was a symbol of his resilience, his determination to carve out a place for himself in the world. Martin stood up and walked around his camp, the morning sun warming his face. The forest was alive with sounds of birds and leaves. It was his home now, the only home he had. The thought of leaving it, of abandoning his hard-won victories, felt like admitting defeat, and he couldn't do that now, not after everything that he had just accomplished. Days passed, and Martin threw himself into his daily routines with renewed vigor. He continued to fish, to forage, to tend to his small garden. Each task, no matter how mundane, reinforced his connection to the land. He improved his shelter further, adding stronger support and reinforcing the walls. The sense of accomplishment he had felt with each improvement was a powerful antidote to the fear that still lingered in the back of his mind. But the memory of those glowing eyes, the hulking silhouette in the night, never completely faded. It was only a constant reminder that he was not alone, that there were forces in the forest beyond his understanding. One night, as Martin lay in his shelter, the familiar sound of the forest lulled him into a light sleep. Suddenly, he was jolted awake by a loud, resounding thud. His heart raced as he sat up, straining to hear. The thud came again, followed by a series of heavy, deliberate footsteps. Each step seemed to shake the ground, reverberating through his small shelter. Martin's breath caught in his throat as he realized the beast was back, and it was close, very close. He grabbed a spear and held it tightly, his knuckles white with tension. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just outside his door. He could hear the beast breathing, a deep, guttural sound that sent shivers down his spine. The door, though sturdy, felt like a flimsy barrier against the immense presence outside. Martin's heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to keep his breathing quiet, afraid that even the slightest noise would provoke the creature. The beast stood there for what felt like an eternity, its massive shadow cast against its thin walls of Martin's shelter by the dying fire. Martin could do nothing but wait, his muscles tense and ready to spring to action. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the beast's heavy breathing. Just when Martin thought that he couldn't bear it any longer, the beast let out a low, rumbling growl and turned away. The footsteps resumed, fading slowly into the distance. Martin didn't dare move until the sounds had completely disappeared. the forest returning to its normal nocturnal symphony. He collapsed back against the wall, his body shaking with a mix of fear and relief. The encounter had been terrifying, nearly giving him a heart attack, but he had survived. The beast had come and gone, and he was still there. Martin knew he couldn't let the fear drive him from his home. He had chosen this life and would see it through. The forest was his, with all its beauty and danger. He would remain vigilant, but he would not abandon his hard-won sanctuary. As he drifted back into an uneasy sleep, he felt a strange sense of peace. The beast was real, but so was he, and he would continue to survive, no matter what. That is going to do it for today. I hope that you guys did enjoy. If you did, be sure to click that like button, hit that subscribe button. We are on the road to 100 subscribers, so if you can be a part of that, go ahead and click that subscribe button and join the campfire today. Every single week we make 3 videos, one on Monday, which is called Echoes of the Past, where I do a paranormal history, looking into the hauntings and everything of certain paranormal locations. Every single Wednesday we do an episode of Far From Fiction, which is my true crime series, and then of course every Friday, the namesake of the channel, what you're watching now, the Friday Night Campfire Stories. I also am going to be releasing a new book at the first of the month. March 1st is when it comes out. I was hoping to have the first copies here today, but I guess Amazon's running a little bit behind. It should be here either today or tomorrow, but so I'll be able to show you the physical copy of the book next week. You guys can pre-order the e-reader edition right now in the description. There's a link to it. You can also get my first book, Whisper in the Shadow. That's out now for e-reader and physical edition, so if you guys have any interest in that, feel free to check that out as well. But yes, I am very excited for March 1st to be able to share a brand new batch of stories with you guys. It's going to be very, very much improved from my first book. Like I said, I'm just excited for you guys to see it, read it, and really get to experience it. I'm very, very proud of the stories, and I hope you get the chance to check it out. But that is going to do it for today. I hope you guys did enjoy it. As I stated earlier, be sure to click that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. As always, thank you for spending a little bit of your evening here with me.